Hey everyone, welcome to GTR1 Media. Today we're looking at a 2002 Acura RSX Type S, and we're going to be installing some gauges. Currently, I have autometer, EGT gauge, oil pressure gauge, boost gauge. This is an older pod that I have modified to hold these gauges. The factory piece of plastic is actually still part of this gauge pod. Just kind of built this up into what it is now, and it's not perfect, but after installing the new gauges, which are going to be the AEM X series gauges, now these gauges work perfectly fine. Just trying to upgrade to digital stuff now. These gauges are about 17 years old, so if you want to take a look under the hood, you see what I currently have underneath there. So give me a second here to get this hood prop up. So yes, as you can see, it does have a turbo on it. But we'll get into that in another video. So first, back to the fuel. I do have an Airmoto fuel pressure regulator mounted to the firewall. So that does have a gauge. I actually want the gauge inside the car so I can view it there. Still going to keep the gauge in the engine bay, but we're going to get the gauge on the inside so we can read the more vital parts of the engine upon startup. Alright, so I have the fittings that I need to install the fuel pressure sensor. These are the Earl Performance fittings. I bought these at Summit Racing. And the way I'm going to mount it, you're going to need a straight through AN 1/8 NPT fitting. And then I also have a T fitting here. It's a 1/8 NPT female fitting right here. Take these out. So the fittings, the sensor, this is the smallest AN wrench I have, a -6. You want to use the AN wrenches on any aluminum fittings so you don't mar or mark them or scratch them. So I don't have a small enough AN wrench. So just have a regular steel wrench. It's going to be a 7/16. So I'm just going to try using electrical tape here to put around the opening of the wrench. Alright, so it slides in there a little bit easier, but not much. So again, I'm just going to give this a shot. So we're going to take off the fitting here at the regulator. Actually, I don't know if this is going to fit on here. So these lines that are in the way right now, gonna be doing a lot of changes to the car over the next year. So stay tuned to the channel, subscribe, hit the like button if you like the videos, and let me know what you guys want to see or anything that you're interested in. Alright, so we got this loose here. So there might be a little bit of fuel that's going to drip out. I haven't ran the car in a while, so there's no pressure in here, so it might just drip a little bit if there's anything. And there isn't, so that's good, no mess. Okay. And again, I'm going to use the thread sealant here. This is the Blue Monster pipe thread sealant. So we'll do a quick run through here how I'm going to have this set up. So this fitting here is going to screw in to the regulator. This is a 1/8 inch NPT. So it's going to screw in there. This 1/8 NPT T is going to screw onto this. Like so. And then my pressure sensor is going to screw into the T at the bottom. And again, I'm just mocking this up here just so you guys can see it. So that's what it looks like when all the fittings are on there. And then I also want my sensor, or I'm sorry, my gauge. I'll put this back on there so I have a gauge under the hood to read when I'm under the hood, and then the other gauge will be in the car. So this is B&M gauge, 100 PSI gauge. Again, this is 1/8 NPT as well. And so I want to screw this onto the front. So it's going to look something like that. Now it does stick out a lot. I'm just trying this out here. So the more I could get this threaded in to the pressure regulator, the more it'll sit back. So this is trial and error. Try this, see how it works. But this is kind of how I wanted it to go. Something like that. And this is a little bit close to the exhaust with all the fittings on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the sealant on here, try and mock it up again and see if I can get it a little bit closer to the regulator. There you go. Just go a little bit more. Again, you can easily strip these out. This is a huge wrench, so you know. Alright, should be good. Let's put the sealant on here. about as tight as we're gonna get it to the pressure sensor or the pressure regulator. So yeah, for right now I'm gonna leave it sit like that. I might angle this sensor a little bit away from the header, but for right now we're gonna leave it like that. So, all right, stay tuned for more. So there's the fuel, oil, and an air fuel ratio gauge. So on the back, they have brackets that I have screwed in. These two bronze screws here, or nuts, whatever you want to call them. With this plastic bracket, they're on the outside of the hole. You can kind of see how they're mounted in there. Alright, next we're going to do the fuel pressure gauge. Wires for that. Every box is going to have labeled fuel. I don't recall them telling you how long these are, but let's just check that out right now. So let's lay these out on the floor. So from the end of the connector, so I'll measure the pigtail first because it's much shorter. So from the connector to the end of the pigtail, it's looking like it's gonna be 48. Well, it's 4 feet, 48 inches. And then it's not going as smooth as I anticipate here. So run this out. So it's looking like six feet, six feet, inch and a half. Okay. So the fuel pressure sensor is up top here, so you have to go underneath the car for that. Again, I'm gonna get the light here. Okay, so the tabs are right here. So I'm gonna slide that in and meet the two tabs together. So then they'll lock. Okay. So on the inside, it up again. Go ahead and push this through. Okay, 5. You gotta get in between the metal bracket and the dash and the plastic. Just pulls right up. Big tail. Stay away from the steering column. Securing everything down, so you don't want them to get twisted in there. Okay, so let's take a look at the front here. So this is fuel pressure. So I'm gonna go on the first one here. Okay. And that's it. Alright, so now we got done running all the wires into the vehicle. We're going to start hooking up the wires to the fuel pressure gauge. So going back to the colors, we need to get power to the gauge first. So we're going to use red here is going to be your switched 12 volt. So that will go to your ignition. So my wire is right here. You can go anywhere you want for your 12 volt source, as long as it's in ignition. Charged wire. So basically it gets power when the ignition is turned all the way in the forward position. On the Acuras here, it has a mark right here, here, and here. So the first one's your accessory. The second mark here with 2 marks on it is your ignition, and then the 3 is to actually engage the starter. So we'll rest in this position here once you turn the key all the way forward, which will then activate this red wire here and then turn all the gauges on. So going back to the diagram, we're going to use red and we want to use black. So on here we have red and black, so these two, and then the oil pressure and fuel pressure harnesses are right here. So I don't know which one's which, not really important at this point because we're just getting power to them, and they both have the same wires coming off of the harness. So they're plugged into the back down there, and then they come up here, and we're just going to use, again, here's the oil fuel manual. Again, the wiring goes red is 12 volts, black's ground. It's got to go to ignition, and they want you to use it on a 5-amp fused circuit. So back to that part, I have my fuse holder right here, and I have this wired up into the ignition, which comes off the ignition harness. You have to use an inline fuse, because the fuse off of here, I believe I'm not too sure, but it's gonna be too many amps. So it's gonna take too many amps if these wires get shorted out, for them to get shorted out, and then it'll ruin the gauges. So you want to use the same fuse that they recommend, and they want you to use a 5-amp fuse. So you're gonna put a 5-amp fuse in here. I got a 10 in there right now. I'll switch that out for a 5. So you gotta get a fuse holder. Again, you can get all this stuff off Amazon if you really wanted to. You can go to your local hardware store, and they have stuff as well. It may not look just like this, but this is just something I had laying around, and I have that wired in. So any fuse holder will work. You can even make one out of connectors and some wire, but I wanted to go ahead and use this for this application. So back to the wiring. Put it to the side. So again, I have all this stuff terminated already, just to make this go a little bit quicker. So I just have the white and the brown. Those will be used if you're running inputs to your Hondata Cape Pro, and these are 5-volt inputs used for the Hondata, because Hondata has 5-volt inputs. Same thing with your AFR gauge, brown, white. So those are all the same for inputs on your Hondata Cape Pro. Again, future video coming on wiring up that stuff. So right now, we're just gonna wire this up. Ground, I have grounded coming off of the ground for the radio and my other electronics I have behind here. And again, that's why I didn't want to run more power off the radio, because I have other stuff tied into that. So I had a separate circuit ran, again, coming off the ignition harness, which runs up to here to your key cylinder. So if you pull all this stuff off, you can get access to that and wire in a fuse to there. You can go to other places, but I just chose to do it there. Okay. So you just gonna get these untangled. These together. So real simple, black to black, red to red. Okay. So I'm just gonna twist these together for right now, just to make sure everything turns on. And then I'll go ahead and terminate them with connectors later on here when I'm finishing up on the install. So I'm just gonna take this, twist these together. Just gonna throw some electrical tape on there so nothing gets shorted out. Take your reds. Put them all together. Run. Okay. So another quick thing to check too, as I was wiring this, getting the wiring to where I need it to go and terminate everything. I was testing my power my ground, just to make sure I got good ground, good power. When I was wiring up the gauges for the sensors, should have brought my lights. So the fuel pressure sensor down here, when I turned the key forward, it engaged the fuel, or the fuel pump, and it was leaking right here at this fitting. I just didn't have this sensor tightened all the way. I didn't want to go too tight because I don't want to strip it out. But you gotta snug them up pretty good. So, but you have to be careful not to over tighten them. So the rest of them were fine between here and the regulator, and this fitting and this T connector, and then to the gauge to the other end of the T connector. Those were fine. It's just it was leaking down here. So just double check that. If it is leaking, you got to pull it all the way out, clean off the sealant, put new sealant on, and then put it back in and tighten it down. So just a little side note. When you're starting up the vehicle too, we'll have to make sure that the oil pressure sensor isn't leaking. And then the AFR sensor, it's pretty snug, so that one's fine. So that's the next one to check once the vehicle's started. I'm not going to start it now because I have the weight gauge disconnected, and this connector here is disconnected. That's for the power steering. That don't really matter, but I can't start it with the wastegate out because there's an exhaust and stuff going all over the place in here. It's going to be really loud. So for today, just going to turn the key forward just so you see them light up. And then once you get all this stuff put back together, and we'll do that as well. So I'm also going to use heat tubing, which protects the wires. This just has like a plastic gloom on it. I don't know what kind of heat it's rated to, but I'm sure it's not rated that high. So I'll show you that in a later video as well, so look out for that. That will be the next thing I'm going to work on after these gauges are done here getting wired up. Alright, so let's hop back into the car. See if we can get these to turn on. Okay, so if you can see here, one click forward is your accessory, nothing's coming on, and then they should turn on as soon as I turn it forward to the next 2 notches, and they turn on. You hear the fuel pump, and then the AFR gauge, it's going to heat up before it'll start reading. Obviously it's not going to read anything, but it's doing its heat cycle right now, and so then that's doing that. Oil pressure, nothing because it's not running. Fuel pressure, we're at 43 psi, 42 psi, and that's right about where it's at. So that's pretty much it. Looks like this thing's done. So it dropped 1 to 2 psi. So we're going to turn this off, and then we're going to double check the sensor, the fuel pressure sensor outside there, and make sure it's not leaking. It's holding now. Maybe just, no, so drop 1 more. So let's see what's going on here. On the gauge, when it's running, it shows 40 psi. So that's where it should be at. So there could be a slight variance between 1 or 2 psi between the gauge here and the digital gauge in the car. So yeah, I don't see any fuel anywhere. I feel around. Except for the sealant I got all over my hands now. But yeah, everything looks good. So it's holding that. I'll leave this as it is. Check it in the morning. There's no leaks. We're good. again, stay tuned for the next video.